Okay. Oh, okay. All right. Today, Heather Lister is going to be talking to us about her working in a prison as a Quaker. So over to you, Heather.
Well, good morning, friends, and I should be all right once I get going. I'm working at the moment at what is called HMP, that's His Majesty's Prison, now Bristol, although most people still refer to it as Horfield Prison. It's the same place. It's the prison just off Gloucester Road, not far from Horfield Meeting House, as a matter of fact, just round the corner there. It's a big men's prison, category B, which means it's not the most secure, but there are quite a lot of people there who are serving long sentences for violent crimes. So there's, they make sure they're not a danger to the public. That's one of the main purposes of the prison. And yes, like most prisons and the criminal justice system generally, there's problems with short staffing and overcrowding. You're probably aware of that. And we're certainly aware of that, those of us who are working in there. I worked at HMP Bristol for over 2 years as a Quaker chaplain, as the sort of official Quaker chaplain. Although, in fact, I only met, I think, perhaps two Quakers in that time, and they were very quickly transferred elsewhere. So I introduced myself, and they were gone. That's another problem with that prison, is that it is what's called a local prison, and which means people come straight from the courts. Often on remand, and then are transferred elsewhere when their case has been dealt with. So there's a fast turnover, so that also makes life a little bit difficult. So I worked there for 2 years as the Quaker chaplain. Then I was afflicted suddenly with an illness or sort of disability. I got an attack of shingles, to digress a moment, about this time last year, and it left me with nerve pain, really serious nerve pain in my left arm. I'm sure probably a lot of people got shingles stories. It took a long time to get better. It's getting better now, which is why I've been able to go back. But nobody could tell me at the time, when it would resolve itself. There's not a lot you can do except wait and see. So there is somebody else now being vetted and going through the security process to be a Quaker chaplain there. I've gone back though because I missed it. I've recently gone back as to give bereavement support. Um, oh, I've got a message from Claire Pickard Cambridge saying she can't get in. Hold on
Oh,
just a minute. Um,
um,
sorry about the interruption.
it's a pity it's a new computer.
I
Um,
can't get into the Zoom session. Seems to be a problem with the link Michael supplied in the notices, or it could be our internet. Yes,
I used the one in the notices to
so
get
did
in
I. Yes, yeah.
because I couldn't find anything else.
Shall I
Um,
shall I send her a quick message? Should I do that? I'll do that on WhatsApp, as she's got in touch with me on WhatsApp.
yeah,
I'll continue.
yeah.
Sorry, Claire.
David has just sent a link out on the chat.
Oh, okay, right.
You're muted, David.
Thank you for telling me, Rosie. Yeah, I've put a link in the chat, but it's also the link that you get by clicking on the green badge at the top right of the screen. So if you can click on the green badge, get the link to this exact meeting, and
I
then
haven't got a green badge.
do you not? At the
Oh, I have. I have. Wait a minute. Oh, well, what will happen if I click on it? Because I'm in the meeting already.
You'll just see a window. You'll get a pop-up window, which
Okay.
the name of the group and a few things, including an
Also, I got to double click. because single clicks don't work anymore on this computer.
Oh dear.
Oh, yes, yes, meeting ID, host, Christopher Doman. I have already changed that. Oh,
I've sent her a message saying that we've all got in on the link because she said it might be her internet. So I've sent her a message saying, we've all managed to do that and there will be a recording. So I'll send her details of the
oh,
recording.
thank you. Yes,
If you want
that's
to
really.
send her the link that I put in the chat, that is absolutely the link to this meeting.
Yeah. How can I send that?
Well, you can copy it from the chat.
Right, copy it from there. And wait a minute, I'll put it in Claire's thing. Paste. There we are.
Aren't we all clever?
Right, okay, we'll see if she joins us in a second.
Lovely.
Okay, that's gone through. Now, where was I? Yeah, I've hardly started. Yes, just talking about talking about my shingles actually. But I've gone back to do bereavement support, which is one of the most useful things I did while I was a chaplain. Actually, I would say that when I was a chaplain, I was saying that I didn't see hardly saw any Quakers, and I'd never started a Quaker meeting because there was so much else to do. There was such a lot of need. What I was doing was what's called the statutory duties around the prison. And you may know some of this, that prisoners have very few rights, but they do have a right to worship in a way of their choice. And uh, and also, there are various sort of protocols that we have to abide by. One of which is that everybody who comes into the prison sees a chaplain within the first 24 hours. So that was one of the things I found myself doing, is scooting around the prison, because there could be anything between 12 and 20. And I didn't really have much time to say hello, except, put a sort of friendly face in front of them and say, listen, if you really need someone to talk to, the chaplaincy is there, whether you're religious or not, we're here, to make this easier for you. And hand out a leaflet, and I gave them a diary and so on, to help a little bit. So that was one of the things. We had to see all what called the new receptions, also everybody in the health wing. The health wing included some people with really quite serious mental health problems, some of whom were waiting for a secure. Here's Claire. Who were waiting for a bed in a secure hospital. There's a lot of mental illness in the prison anyway, a lot of depression, anxiety, and so on, generally. So, it's not that easy, but bereavement was a rather special thing that I did a lot of, because if someone in prison has a friend or relative who dies, it's actually very unlikely they'll be allowed out to the prison, out to the funeral. In fact, only for a parent and a grandparent, if the grandparent has really had a lot to do with their upbringing. Occasionally they can, if the family want them, and they do have to go in handcuffs and escorted, which is not ideal, as you can imagine. So it's a situation that makes prisoners very unhappy, plunges some of them into utter despair, but is also quite what I think of as a growth point in their lives, because it causes them to reflect on themselves, on their behavior, on their relationships with this person, on their relationship with somebody who loved them and wanted the best for them. And it makes them rethink. So, somebody can be alongside to accompany them in that part of their journey. I really felt it was doing some good, and they said it was doing some good. The feedback was very good. I remember actually just before I had to give up after the shingles, one young man saying to me, "Don't stop what you're doing." because he said the lads need it. He said, I can't tell you how much better I feel for having talked to you. And I'd done nothing except really receive what they had to say, but it really, really helped. So I was quite keen to go back and do that work as much as I could. Okay, how one of the questions I get asked a lot is, what sort of got you into this work? So I've been thinking a little bit about that. I think one of the things that going right back to when I was quite a young woman, not a child, but a young woman, there was a family friend who was a probation officer. And he was one of these he was really a kind of tough character, very, very unsentimental, but he was very compassionate. And, he used to talk about the prisoners sometimes, or the work that he did in the prison, and how he was probably the only person who'd really engaged with that prisoner and simply asked, why did you do that? Not in a judgmental way, but in a real effort to understand what had brought them to doing what they had done and to get them into prison. And I was struck by what wonderful work this is, this perception that he had. And it came to me that really for the first time, that these weren't wicked people, they were suffering people, and to think of them in those terms. So that struck me very much as a young person, but at that stage, I never thought of being able to do it. And I think it is something that you need a bit of life experience for. I mean, I say that, but in fact, I'm very impressed by the way some of the younger women officers, cope, and how well they're treated by the prisoners as well. Because of their expectations and the way they carry themselves. It's very impressive. Then my next sort of inroad into prisons was with Graham Davey, our late friend Graham Davey, who belonged to Bedminster Meeting, and he was the Quaker chaplain there some time ago. Again, it's probably about 20 years, and he took me in. I went with him for a carol service a couple of years running. And the first time I'd been inside the walls, and I was very, very struck by, the sense of being unfree, that, the high walls, the rolls of wire at the top of the walls and so on. So that was my next, although we only went to the chapel on that occasion. Polly Lowe was the chaplain as well, and she showed me round. She was able to show me onto the wings. And Bristol Prison is an old Victorian prison, and I remember looking down those. We've all seen them, in prison dramas. Those narrow corridors with the metal doors either side, and I thought, it must be like descending into hell. It was truly awful. And I remember thinking that I never wanted to forget the fact that when I was working there, I'd never wanted to kind of get used to the fact that we are locking people up in this way. It may be necessary, but still, what a horrible position to be in, to have lost the trust of your fellow human beings and treated like somebody dangerous and under suspicion, and the door closed and locked against you. I reflected on how that would feel. My only other experience really before actually starting work there were these prison dramas on television, and there have been some very good prison dramas, but of course they want the drama, and they do tend to give the impression of prisons very often as places really out of control, as kind of boiling cauldrons of violence and corruption, and very dangerous places to be. So having seen that, and I remember, for example, the film The Silence of the Lambs, where Jodie Foster plays a young detective who walks down one of these corridors to the accompaniment. She sort of runs the gauntlet of these obscene comments being shouted from either side. So, I did have my misgivings going in, but I can honestly say that I have never been intimidated or insulted by the prisoners. On the contrary, and this was quite a surprise to me, how very pleasant and helpful and welcoming they were. And perhaps that wouldn't be so surprising, really, because, from the start, they think of the chaplaincy as being people who will listen to them, who are, so to speak, on their side. We don't go in to sort of judge or punish them, but we do listen. I remember reading something, it came back into my head, something that George Orwell said in his book, Down and Out in Paris and London. That was his account of deliberately becoming homeless for a year and writing about his experiences. And he said one of the worst things about being in that position is that women, any respectful woman, would not talk to you or have anything to do with you. And that was very humiliating. And, I get the feeling that it means a lot to the male prisoners to be sort of respected enough, really, to be spoken to, and it raises them up, I feel. And
Interesting point.
yeah, is everyone okay? Can everyone hear me all right? And yeah, it's okay. I have so much to say, I don't want to miss anything out. Yeah. On top of that, of course, I get this distinct feeling that a lot of the men think of me as their sort of mum figure, or increasingly a nan figure. And I'll go onto the ward, and it's, "Oh, you're looking for someone, miss? Anything we can do, miss?" It's really, really very pleasant. The other thing that makes it very pleasant to work there is their humour, the way they keep up their spirits. I really admire that. There's a kind of courage to that. There's a lot of kind of friendly chatter, and that makes it a nice place to work. So I've talked about the kinds of things that I do. One of the most useful things I do, actually, I will just mention that before working in the prison, I actually worked for Bristol Mind as an advocate, and that was listening to the stories of people who are often dismissed, because also has been kind of unreliable, and kind of talking to people who are supposed to be helpful and so on their behalf, or helping them to advocate for themselves. And I find myself doing quite a bit of that in the prison, because if mental health patients are dismissed for being mad, then prisoners are dismissed for being bad. They don't deserve the help. And there is that kind of thread of feeling in the prison. By no means all the prison officers are like that. There's some very kindly prison officers, and especially I find the older prison officers who are sort of ex-army, you'd expect to be a bit gruff, but they're often very, very kind, whereas it's sometimes the young men who feel challenged by the behaviour of the prisoners and can be quite, sort of combative. I'll put it like that, and which is very unhelpful. One of the things, though, thinking about, so sometimes, a prisoner will sort of talk to me, and with their permission, I can go and raise it in the office, and it can help them, be listened to, and it can joggle things along. I can give an example of that. I was just going around doing these statutory duties one day, and a man called me desperately from behind his door. There's a sort of hatch in the door you can talk through, and he said, "I shouldn't be here. They've put me on immigrant watch, but I'm a British citizen. I shouldn't be here. I think they've forgotten about me." And I said, "Well, I'm sure they haven't." And I said, I don't suppose I can do much, but I can go and see if, asking the office if things are happening. So I went down to the office, and the officer down there said, "Oh yes, he's there'll be a home office person along in about 10 days probably." And I thought, well, that's not very good news, but I had one or two other things to do. I went back within half an hour to give him this rather unwelcome news, and he was waving a letter through the hatch. And he said, they've just given me this letter from the Home Office. And he read it out. This man is a British citizen. And he said, I'm going to be freed by tea time. And he said, and that's all down to you. Thank you so much. And I don't know, I can't really do anything, really. But it might be that I did jog things along just by, if you've got somebody at your back, and also I think a bit from the chaplaincy, because you've got God there, haven't you? You can't be denied, perhaps in the same way. But I know that I've just recently been to a conference where Gay Delap was talking about how she felt about being in prison. We all know Gay, don't we? And she was put in prison for for protest. And she said one of the worst things was lack of information, not knowing what was going on. And quite a lot of I find my work, it doesn't sound like much, just finding, oh yeah, that's going to happen next Thursday. Even if it's bad news, it's some news and they know what they can cope with. And I think that's very important. And that struck me very much what Gay said is not knowing. One of the difficulties of working in prison, of course, is that you can't always give the information because it clashes with the needs of security. One of the things I felt very indignant about, for example, is when somebody was going to be able to go to a funeral, they weren't told until the day of the funeral whether they were going. I thought this was quite unreasonable, and somebody deeply unhappy, I thought it was rather cruel. But I was told, no, there's no alternatives to that, because some will use a funeral or the pretense of a funeral in order to escape. So they can't give, they can't give these messages very far in advance because they'd have time to plot. So that's true. And similarly with when they're going to move to another prison, can I phone my mum and let her know? No, you can't. You can't do that in case there's some sort of plot going on. And in fact, the security gets in the way of a lot of the good things that we want to do. Getting people together for groups, for example, and that sort of thing, because there's something called non-association, because they might have some beef with another prisoner outside the prison, and therefore they can't be allowed to meet within the prison. Otherwise, there's trouble. It's kind of a new way to a calm life I've come from. It's a new way of thinking about things that, you have to be quite suspicious. What else have I got? I've written the odd notes so I don't forget anything. Sort of information and so on. It's quite great. Yeah. I mean, why do I do it, and why did I miss it so much, and why do I go back for it? I don't get too bothered. Some people, I don't get too bothered about considerations of whether I'm doing it for me, that I get something out of it. I don't worry too much about that. I think we all get something out of being useful, of being appreciated, and just helping people along. I don't worry about that too much. I don't think I would do it unless I enjoyed it, for reasons I hope are clear, because it feels useful and because I warm to the people I'm helping. I think that's very important. So you could say, well, I'm doing it with love. I mean, love's a big word, but I do care. I also do it because I think, analyzing, because I'm curious. I always want to know how people tick, what makes a good life, how do we make a mess of it? What sort of things happen to us to get people into this unfortunate position? I have 4 grown-up sons, all of whom are fine now and who haven't had trouble with the law. But, it's been a bumpy ride on occasions. And I've often reflected that life is quite difficult to navigate, even in the best circumstances. And you know, the vast majority of these prisoners do not come from the best circumstances. You know, they haven't had attention, they haven't had approval of the right kind of things. A lot of them, you know, there's been a lot, hasn't there, about people joining gangs because it's a family, because they haven't had a reasonable sort of backing from family life. So all that I find very, very interesting. And I do find the intricacies of the law quite interesting as well. Um, so, and all the time, I mean, every day, every time I talk to a prisoner, I'm learning something, and I enjoy that. And it's sort of that is ongoing. You know, I'll never I don't know it all, and I learn about the variety, the diversity of people, and how they live their lives, and I do enjoy that. I think that's about all I have to say for now. Oh, I've been going for quite a while. That's interesting. Um, so I will invite any questions you want to ask. I do have a poem that I wrote fairly early on. I'm not sure whether that would be appropriate now or whether I'll listen to your questions first and finish with the poem. I don't know. What would you like me to do? Shall I read a poem now and get that over with? Because I think it kind of summarizes what I've said really in quite a lot. I wrote this while I was working as a chaplain, and yeah, I suppose that, as I have said, that I'm not so much. I've never gone in primarily. I could have just gone in and run Quaker meetings, or you know, attempted to join Quaker meetings, but I've done what I felt was most useful. So I feel I've been in the prison, you know, as a Quaker rather than doing outreach or something and promoting Quakerism, really. So this is the poem that I wrote after, I guess, a month or two being there. The prison has a tall brick tower, a clock that stands at 2:30 all day, and ragged clouds race past through frozen skies over high walls and coils of sharpened wire. The lives are bleak that lie and wait below, rapist, murderer, and arsonist. I cannot know the struggle and the hurt that brought them here, those who are fixtures on this sorry list, and often nor can they. Some are so young and look quite ordinary, and some use blades against their own young skin. Walking the wings, I call through each small hatch, "Are you okay?" And men are rising to their feet in hope, day after day. Some call to me, "Miss, miss." I lean against the metal door to hear. And there is anger, grief, and haunting shame, and there is courage and good company. So fragile is the trust that every turning of a key destroys. But all the same, leaving, I look back from the busy street and think again, yes, there they are, my boys.
Yeah. Can I?
Yes, certainly do.
Right. When you went into the garden of the Horfield prison, you might have noticed beehives, because one of the things that happens in the prison is some of them learn to keep bees.
Yes.
And I went into the Key Cafe,
Yes.
which is run entirely by former prisoners, because quite often when prisoners come out, particularly young men, they don't have the means of making a living. Honestly, the food is excellent. I've been there several times. If ever I have visitors, because it's 5 minutes from where I live, we go to the Hive, the Quay Cafe.
Yes, good.
And they are learning how to run a cafe. And, you know, it is a fact. Humans have to eat 3 times a day. So it's a very good project.
Yeah.
So my message to everyone is go to the Quay Cafe for lunch. See how it is working out. I am totally impressed. Totally impressed. My former husband was a chef, so I do know a bit about, you know, how you run an organization. So the Quay Cafe, well, I asked when I went to the cafe last week, you know, have you got any honey for sale? It's 12, it's quite expensive, but then it's organic and da da da.
It's lovely too. It's gorgeous.
But it is an excellent project to rehabilitate young men who often, I was a magistrate from, you know, for several years, and some of those young prisoners have been carers for their mum, for example. They have had a very difficult life. So projects like the Quay Cafe is an excellent thing to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Thank you, Angela. Yes. Yes. The Quay Cafe, and it's right on Gloucester Road. You know, you can see it walking down from the Horfield Meeting House. Yeah, it's on that side of the road, just on the corner of Cambridge Road, where the prison is. And yeah, it's getting people kind of into the world of work. You know, otherwise, you know, what other avenues are there, you know?
But it gives them qualifications that they can use. That, in my opinion, is one of the important things. Rehabilitation of former, particularly young prisoners.
Yes, yes. And I don't know whether I may have given rather a bleak picture of the prison, but in fact, there's a lot of good work going, and a lot of and optimism really amongst prison officers. I mean, one man who'd been there about 16 years after a murder, I don't know the circumstances, but showed me a folder full of certificates that he had, trying, you know, qualifications. I mean, academic ones like sort of English and maths for a start, but he really had, you know, he'd worked his socks off, including one for embroidery. There's a wonderful initiative in there. It's called Fine Cell Work, and they make and sell sort of toys and embroideries. And he was just the sort of person I like to think of, you know, huge fat fingers doing these intricate and beautiful things, and to create something beautiful. I mean, there are all sorts of good things. Oh, another thing that is excellent is changing tunes. Now that's where prisoners are given a musical instrument and instruction to play, and they do concerts. There's one coming up. If anybody's interested, I will send you the link to the Changing Tunes conference. And quite honestly, the reoffending rate of people who engage with changing tunes is so low that I don't know why they don't just give every prisoner a musical instrument and instruction of how to play, because you know, it's something to find out. I think I've got this sort of philosophy of life. Part of my philosophy of life is that you find out what you can do and contribute it. And, you know, and that's one of the great sources of satisfaction and happiness in life. You can do that. And some of these guys do find that. So yeah. Yes, thank you, the Quay Cafe. I'm glad you mentioned that. Any other thoughts and questions?
I've got lots, but just on the Quay Cafe, I looked it up momentarily on my phone and found the homepage, and it says the Quay Cafe, food with conviction, which is very funny, very sweet. But there's I at one point, before I got involved with Quakers, I learned at some point I was involved in community building, and I got involved in restorative justice or learning about it.
Yes.
There was a Quaker prison governor, Tim Newell at Grendon Prison. Uh,
Oh, Brendan, yes, that's very progressive.
Actually, I think I ended up in correspondence with him. I got a copy of his book and so on.
Mm.
And what the point, if any, is that by giving people attention, by giving people a space, by addressing in restorative justice, one of the things is you have facilitated meetings with the victim
Mm.
so that the offender isn't being cut off from things, but is actually sort of like a life, like when you die, you get a life review. There's a bit of a life review. What you did had this effect, and
Yeah,
that can be very restorative.
yes,
And
yeah.
I saw there was when I was working at Hamilton House, Martin Connolly, the owner, got involved with a former um, officer in the army, Simon Edwards, who had started a group working with prisoners because he had been enlisted by Margaret Thatcher's government to do a survey of the prisons because she was going to take the prison system down after she dismantled the mining industry. And his job was to survey the prisons to see how they could be run by the army when Maggie Thatcher got the officers out on strike. And he said his overwhelming thought, he was going around the prisons and he was saying, these are like my squaddies. These are the young people in my units who
Mm.
grew up without guidance, that
Yeah.
by being in the forces and
Mm.
was providing support to people before he determined that something like 50% of the crime in Bristol or 50% of the damage was being caused by people after release,
Mm.
repeat offenders. And
Mm.
if you could meet with them and provide them with shelter and work when they came out,
Exactly. Yeah.
rather
Yeah.
than just a few quid, and they go to the pub and blow it on a
Yeah.
boozing with their mates, and then the next thing they've got to do is nick something. And
Well, yes, or even not even that. A lot of the prisoners in Bristol Prison are what they call on recall, and this is when they're released with certain conditions. And it is just so easy to breach that, being in the wrong place, sometimes even just having a drink, not causing any trouble, but or being late for an appointment, even if the bus broke down or something. It seems very easy and very uneconomical of effort somehow to get people back for a short time to punish them for such minor things. Sorry, anyway, carry on, David.
just the
Mm.
conclusion would be that being reminded by you, and it's wonderful. I'm very moved by both hearing how loving and compassionate you are with the prisoners and how respectful they are of you.
Mm.
These are ordinary. We're all ordinary people thrown on a planet where it's a challenging place to live, and we make mistakes, and
Yeah.
sometimes those mistakes knock us down, and it's hard to get up. And it's not too difficult to imagine constructing a society where it's easier to get up and easier to be rehabilitated and
Mm.
back into society. And I thank you so much for reminding us of what's possible.
Yes. So it's such a beautiful poem too, Heather. I was struggling to unmute myself while I was just spoken earlier. I'm on this dreadful new computer, you see.
Yes.
But I found it very moving, and I'm so glad that I'm going to be able to read it again later. When David has successfully transposed this session and onto what's the correct phrase, David?
Oh,
Onto the
I,
ether.
upload. I upload the recording to YouTube. I'm not sure what the correct phrase is.
Right.
Leaked, posted.
Oh, yes.
Right.
That's good. No, looking forward to that. It was really lovely. Thank you.
Yes. Heather, may I speak?
Yes, certainly.
Right.
Nice
Oh,
to
just to
see
say,
you.
oh, sorry, I had a struggle. Our internet was actually down, and eventually we got it rebooted. Yes, just to say, I thought your poem was absolutely moving, really important to me. Anyway, thank you. And I did want to ask you, you've been very interesting about how uplifting it can be going into prison, and particularly the help one can offer. But what might have been, if you cast your mind back, what might have been one of the most challenging situations where you battled to think about how to react to someone who was clearly in great need? I'm just intrigued to know whether there was a time when you thought, wow, this is a new one for me, and how am I going to react, and how did that play out?
I'm trying to think. Various things have I'm trying to think of quite honestly, the prisoners just seem so grateful to talk to somebody.
Yeah.
I was called, somebody who was on constant watch because he was threatening suicide. Wanted to see a chaplain, and they sent me along. I found as a Quaker, I was quite useful to kind of mop up. About half the prisoners are not registered with any religion, and yet there are times when they need some sort of support of that kind. And this young man, had attempted suicide, wanted to end his life, and and call for a chaplain. He was on constant watch, which means that there's an officer outside his cell, and and he's watched, and talked to and visited, and just keep an eye on him until the crisis passed. But he was quite firm about wanting to take his own life. He said he had 3 young children. And I feel I've got very mixed feelings about suicide. I mean, I'm compassionate, of course, that anybody should want to end their lives, but it does leave other people. The effect on other people is so dreadful, and I have seen that. And so he said, "Oh, I've written to all my children, and I'm sure they'll understand." And I'm sure they prefer to have their dad. I don't know. I gave him a good listening to, but I did leave feeling, I don't think I did very much good there, because he was so determined, and he seemed determined to tell me. And yet I felt, well, he called for a chaplain. Perhaps he wanted me to forbid him to do so. It's very hard. He certainly seemed to think that, and I've noticed this again with suicidal people, that his time had come. Events were showing him. He said, somebody nicked something from my cell. This shows that I shouldn't go on any longer. So it almost wasn't his choice. Life was showing him it was time to finish. That was extremely difficult, and I worried about it afterwards. About a fortnight afterwards, I saw him again, and he said, "Oh, can you deliver this to the office?" And it was an application he's made for enhanced status, which means you get all kinds of privileges and things. So I thought, oh, he's doing okay then. But about a week after that, he died. He did actually manage to end his own life, which was very shocking. And that was a good 3 weeks after I talked to him. So it probably wasn't anything I said, but it does go through your mind, as it always does, I think. Could I have done more? Could I have said something that could have headed it off? It's that was very tricky, and very bad time. I was left somehow with a sense of failure. You know, people were, I talked to various people about it, and they were very reassuring, you know. There were all sorts of things going on in his life I wasn't aware of, you know. And also it often occurs to me that, because people talk about attempts to their own life, that sometimes the actual suicide is an impulsive act. You know, that they didn't really mean it, or it was an impulsive thing that they're quite glad to be rescued from. I've heard that expressed as well. Thank goodness somebody broke down the door and cut me down, sort of thing. So that's a very complicated area. It's I've spoken to one or two other people afterwards, but that's the one that stays in my mind as a kind of failure of somebody determined that the end of their life had come. And you know, what a pity. You know, he was quite a young man, good health, had a lot going for him, but no, that was it. There are various other, you know, the only other sort of difficult things I've mentioned in passing, the mental health problems, and sometimes, you know, you know, it's something that you are insulted in a way that you can't take personally because they're clearly, you know, very seriously ill, and I don't find that really hurts me at all. There was one. I remember doing my rounds one day, and there was one very tall Rastafarian chap with hair down to his bottoms, amazing hair, singing a hymn very loud. So I waited until he'd finished his hymn singing, and then said, "I'm from chaplaincy." He said, "Chaplaincy, what religion?" I said, I'm a Quaker." He said, "Right, Quakers were complicit with the slave trade, so you can F off." So I did. I didn't think. So yeah. So once or twice, but I mean, I went the next day, and he was perfectly agreeable. So I don't think it was personal. It's just, yeah, something that came into his mind at the time. So yes, I can't say it's
I'm so sorry.
Yeah. There's some things, yeah, it's certainly difficult to hear. Some people have had so much grief in their life. I mean, especially with the bereavements, you know, some of them come from just such violent backgrounds and deprived backgrounds. And, you know, you go along and talk about maybe a parent or grandparent has died, which is the usual thing, but also there's a string of cousins or friends and things have also died, you know, while you're here, miss. And it's it is very sad, and accidents they've had, and just, oh, I don't know. Is it Chaucer said that God never puts upon us a burden that we can't bear? But you know, I listen to these guys and I think, you know, these are some of the people who are least able, have the least resilience, for various reasons, to ill fortune, and it just piles in, really. We have this sort of downward spiral. I try to assure them that you can have an upward spiral as well. Things can get better. There are people who will help, you know. Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Is anyone else? I don't know whether that answer is really clear, but
Oh, it does. It's a
but
very, very real insight into what you can sometimes. Yeah,
there are far more times when I felt I have actually helped and been,
yes,
because of
course.
good feedback and
Yes.
gratitude, you know. And I think, goodness, you know, I don't think there's anybody there who's in their lives had too much attention or too much validation, or
Yes.
so they appreciate it.
Yeah.
One of the big lessons from the community building movement that grew out of Scott Peck's work, The Different Drum, there was a book published called The Power of Acceptance. And it was sort of distilling down what happens in circle processes. And people may get into, we may sort of pretend that we're all good and all singing from the same hymn sheet, and then differences emerge, and we want to be seen as, oh, I'm good, I'm with these people. And Scott Peck calls that pseudo community. And then differences emerge, and we see we're different, which is quite clear when people are convicted and in prison. They've been
Yes.
publicly held up as different. And, the most restorative thing is to create processes in which they feel accepted and reintegrated in society. And that happens in indigenous processes where somebody who's offended against the community is just put at the center of the circle and told, you're part of our community. We care about you. Why did you do this? What have you done wrong? What can we do to bring you back in? And those kinds of processes can be incredibly healing. And we are we're really not so. There are things we know we could do, which if we just started doing on a bigger scale would be incredibly healing for our society.
Yes. I think too often, public opinion, too often, they're felt to be the undeserving. I think, we used to have the poor, deserving poor and undeserving poor, and certainly, certainly prisoners at the bottom of the heap as far as deserving.
I'm sorry to be so late. I had another meeting, but I just want to say in response to that
Mary,
that
we
can
can
you hear me?
we can hear you,
Yes,
but
I can. We can only see your keyboard really, and
Oh, that's because my
there you are. That's better.
yes,
That's
I
better.
had it adjusted for my Pilates class, and that's not the same. Right. Yeah, so actually public opinion is not as vicious as is made out to be. I think sort of right-wing newspapers double as public opinion. I remember doing a crime survey many years ago where you asked people, you sort of read them as you kind of said, do you think the criminal justice system is too lenient? And they say, yes, they should, lock them up. And then you say, oh, here's a little case study, and it's something about a burglary or something. So, what do you think somebody ought to get? What kind of sentence? And they would usually say, well, they need to put something back into society. They should have community service. And then I said, you want to know what they got? They got 3 years for a first offence, and they're shocked.
Yes. Yeah, it's just that I feel so
Yeah.
angry sometimes when I see
Mm.
the unforgiving attitudes
Yeah.
being encouraged in the press. I mean,
Yes.
I remember somebody once said that when you read a Daily Mail article, you end up hating somebody,
Yeah.
and it's that kind of blame.
Yeah.
It can be directed in different ways, as we know, but and the idea that of the wrong on as soon as somebody's committed a crime. There's it shows that what that person is like, and there can be no redemption.
And they're known
that
by
is
the worst thing
encouraged in some quarters.
and they're known by the worst thing they ever did.
Yes, I'm glad. I often think, goodness, I'm glad I'm not judged by the worst things I've done in my life. I haven't even been to prison, but yeah. Thank you. Anyone else to ask me anything while I'm here?
Well, so thank you so much, Heather. I've made copious notes, and I'm really looking forward to going back and listening to this quietly online, which I often do. And it's a very enriching experience. So I really recommend that to anybody, to watch
How
it
do we
again.
get hold of the recording, Patsy?
Oh, our expert, David.
Ah,
Yeah, well, we've been trying to compile. I put them up on the internet, and
Mhm.
you can often find them by as simple as searching on Quaker Talk and the speaker's name. So you should be able to find it by searching on Heather Lister Quaker Talk. Uh, what we haven't done in this case, I'm not because you weren't publicized in the normal way, I think. I haven't got a title yet for this talk, and I'm imagining something like Quaker Chaplain at Horfield Prison or something like that. But if you could give me a title, then people will be able to find it by searching on that title as well.
Well, I think the title I gave to Patty was just A Quaker and Prison Work.
Okay, good.
Um, because I'm happy to talk. I mean, there's other things I haven't touched on, such as prison visiting. You know, what can you do, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And prison visiting is something that might actually suit a lot of people.
Often invite a return visit from speakers to go into their subject in more depth, so you can come back and
I'm
think
making a note on that.
of the potential for Quakers to get involved in some way in reform, restoration, and community. It'd be great.
Yeah, that would be really
Yeah,
good.
I'll try and look at and listen because I've missed most of it because of my other meetings. But any idea when it will be there or?
Oh yeah, well, no, I glibly say normally I often get them up on the same day, but sometimes I get caught up in other wild things, and it
Yeah,
can take a few more days. But it will be up soon.
yeah,
And we have a cumulative playlist. And what I was going to add that we're trying to have a list of people who are regular attendees and not so regular, and to send out at least once a month a notice of these are going to be the talks, and here is a link to the recent
yeah.
ones. So, and we
I am actually doing that, David.
Mm.
That's I can't promise I've got everyone on it. I hope I've got everyone on it. So if anyone isn't getting a rather grotty looking
Mm.
email because I haven't yet learned how to do it as a PDF,
yeah,
but a list basically of the month's talks
Yeah.
should already be reaching you every month.
And they
Um,
appear in the area meeting newsletter.
oh,
yeah,
good.
The area
Yes,
meeting
they
newsletter,
should
because
do.
they did that.
Yeah.
And Redland newsletter and our notices, our weekly notices, they're always there as
Oh,
well.
great. Oh, that's
A
good. Yeah.
well-respected group.
good.
Mm.
Thank you. But
Good.
I would like to make it look a bit smarter. I was a bit shocked to discover how it did look. I hadn't realised it looked so untidy, so I shall be working on that. Well, we enjoyed that very much, and we would like you to do a return visit to encourage other people to take part in prison work. So thank you very much indeed, Heather. I
Thank you.
hope to. I ought to say next week, Gordon Purdy, who's with us today,
Yep.
is going to be giving a talk entitled Seeds. I
Mm.
hope I've got that right, Gordon. You haven't sent me a longer version. You're muted. Um,
You're muted still.
you're still muted.
You need to click the button harder. The audio button.
Yes.
There we go.
Well, that's in the way of my talk next week. If it takes as long to gonna sign in as it did today, it'll never happen. Well, yes, that is the title I gave, but I don't want to go into it now. But it turns out to be something very different. Anyway, I shall let you know about what needs to be done.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Right. And
Sorry,
now,
could I just ask what the seed talk is about?
if I don't stop it at about 2 hours.
No, I just wanted to get a sense of what it was, along what lines the seed talk was. Is this about horticulture? Is it is it about Quaker spirituality?
Well, I think I can safely say if it does get done, it won't be anything directly to do with Quakers or to do with seeds.
Oh,
So that's all I can say.
all
Anyway,
right. The mystery deepens. Thank you.
I think we can look forward to a bit of a mystery talk, but I'm sure it will still be entertaining and interesting. So,
Thank
maybe,
you.
maybe.
thank you.
Um,
Okay.
okay, I must sign
Okay.
off. Actually,
Well,
I think.
yes, we haven't got Ray to say goodbye this week, so David and I will say goodbye and thank you all very much, and particularly, of course, to
Thank you.
Heather.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
coming. Thank you.
Okay. Bye bye.
Bye.